Heidi is Associate Professor of Practical Theology and Pastoral Counseling in the Christian Studies Department at Women's University in Seoul. Before IHA, she was Assistant Professor of Pastoral Theology at Xavier University in Cincinnati, Ohio, USA. Professor Park holds degrees from Duke University, Yale Divinity School, Harvard Divinity School, and a PhD from Claremont School of Theology in Practical Theology and Spiritually Integrative Psychotherapy. Her body of research spans a broad gamut of topics and themes critical to pastoral and practical theology today, with unique contributions to such hermeneutic and methodological frameworks as hybridity, postcoloniality, spectrality, reflexive and relational phenomenology, immigrant studies, or the study of the Korean immigrant cultural and religious experience, collective trauma, and spirituality amid pandemic realities. Her current research focuses on the practical theological methodology of boundary experiences, accumulating from qualitative studies on the Korean and Korean American experiences complexified by colonization, the Cold War, and the rapid embracement of neoliberalism. Dr. Park is a highly active member of multiple academies and ecclesial bodies. Among numerous academic and ecclesial organizations, she is currently serving as the Vice Chair of the Steering Committee of the Society for Pastoral Theology and a member of the Steering Committee of the Practical Theology Unit of the American Academy of Religion. Within IAPT, Professor Park is serving as a member of the local conference planning committee, our shepherd for the days here, and by extension, a member of the Academy's executive committee. For our contemplation this afternoon, Dr. Park's presentation is titled Theological Anthropology of the Undead. How did we fail to decay? Let us welcome Dr. Heidi.
Just a little correction. I didn't have a degree at Harvard. I just was there as a special student while having my baby, who's actually out there serving you. So yeah, just that little correction. Anyway, let me begin. A little more than 10 years ago, Nancy Ramsey, in her plenary at Society for Pastoral Theology, called for the need to construct messy theology, which I found to be very persuasive. Messiness reflects the reality of the lived experiences, especially the clinical reality of pastoral care happening at the margin of the society, where a clear-cut description is never possible. Ever since, my academic work has been messy, which not all journal editors have the stomach for. So during the emotional struggle with each rejection, Nancy, where are you? Oh, I blame you a little bit, sorry. But today, you are my captives, so you are going to ride through a practical theological roller coaster, going through the mess that I bring to you. This mess is stinky and dirty, ambivalent, and inconclusive, yet it contains an important prophetic voice of the younger generation in this time of the Anthropocene. The human instinct to move away from such mess is something pastoral caregivers train to overcome, because the sights that we want to avert our eyes usually carries the suffering, the deep scars, the pain that we need to attend to. But pastoral caregivers repeatedly find such spots to be where new life begins, where resilience is born, as much as it could be the breeding ground for further pain. So we dive deeper and deeper into this mess. The conference is called to find practical wisdom in the living web of the Anthropocene, calls for an alternative to anthropocentric theology. I've been carrying this call for the last 2 or 3 years, trying to see the human world from non-human perspective. My research tries to get to the world of the microbe or the decomposers, the often disregarded elements in our ecosystem, to view the political and economic world of humans. Zombies are perfect subjects for that. Their decaying skin seems to signal decomposition, making them fitting for this task. However, doing that requires navigating through very unfamiliar territory. Therefore, I would like to give you a roadmap for our journey. Oh man, I've been clicking the wrong thing. The roadmap. Where is the roadmap? Okay. I first argue that hikikomoris are real-life zombies who are the exposed by the neoliberal political economic system. To construct this claim, I examined the life of hikikomoris by looking into the space they occupy both offline and online. These spaces have ingenuine mechanisms that avert the gazes of people, so I will examine the dynamics for such aversion in detail, which will reveal a powerful process that decomposes the political system of democracy and the economic system of neoliberalism. Out of this analysis, I will construct my theological anthropology of the undead by revising the concept of resurrection. So this practical theological roller coaster will somewhat look like this. Okay? Because my research process was like this. So fasten your seatbelt and stay with me. We start our journey with zombies' birthing ground, the tombs. The modern world of coffins and vaults reveal the human fear of decomposition. The technology of corpse involves all efforts to prevent the natural elements from interacting with the dead body to slow down the decomposition process. The most ecologically sound corpse treatment remains simple interment to the ground and covering with dirt so that no other chemicals or human-made materials enter the underground to form chemical or microplastic pollution. For countless reasons, we are failing in this task. Why did it get there? Okay, yeah. Okay. I remember a jarring moment facing a Western burial ground. I was passing by a cemetery in Connecticut where this gate stands, and my atheist mathematician friend said, "This inscription always creeps him out." This eschatological phrase signifying resurrection was a signifier for zombie apocalypse for him. The theology of resurrection, thus, to non-faithful eyes, touches the primal fear of the posthumous decomposing body. This fear culminates in the concept of a zombie who, while scarily deformed, remains an individual person. The individuality of zombie, with the expression of personhood in decaying skin and singular hunger, manifests in reality sometimes. One day, the internet spat out the following video. I have not seen a drug epidemic at this level of ruin, but I have been quite close to this phenomenon. I expected to see such a margin in Korea, but the pandemic hit many things. I knew that people were suffering, but the pain was not visible in the social isolation of them and me, and I only had to assume the worst and imagine. Nonetheless, the zombies showed up in media constantly, expressing this society's direst and most prevalent social and economic margin. In fact, zombies have a long history of representing the social reality. Since they first appeared in the 1932 movie White Zombie, they have been haunting not just the theater and literature, but the imagination of scholars across the field. Even without considering the metaphors for zombie enterprise, zombie clients, zombie personal computers, zombie minds, and the zombiness has turned into terminology that defines the narrative of political science and economics, as in zombie liberalism, zombie capitalism, and zombie society. In Undoing the Demos, Wendy Brown analyzes how democracy is undone by the neoliberal process in which the political agency of Homo politicus is vanquished by the neoliberal rationality of the Homo economicus. In this paradigm, the rationality of neoliberalism has turned human capital subjects into economic objects and human beings into human capital rather than economic agents seeking their own profit. The rationality of neoliberalism permeates every nook and cranny of contemporary human behaviors and desires. Pastoral theologian Bruce Rogers Vaughan observes that the human agency assumed in political equality is replaced by the principle of equal opportunities, thus turning the political human agency into human capital, competing against other human capital, isolating each human in their own cage by blaming failures as their own fault. This generates what he calls the third order of suffering, which is often unnamed and undiagnosed but ubiquitously felt in the neoliberal society. When the third order of suffering is felt everywhere, the marginalized in the neoliberal society, who, in the economic terms of the neoliberal world, are the surplus of human capital, are not just agonized, but are spitted out of the system, which sociologist Sakia Sassen calls expulsion. The expulsed had many faces and names: the lepers, the crazy, the criminals, the homeless, the zombies. If we overcome the instinct to avert our eyes from the scariness of zombies, we see that their faces and body are traumatized, decaying in pain. Given their birthing ground of neoliberalism, their trauma possibly tells the story of Roger Vaughan's third order suffering. Then the question becomes, how do they look in real life? There are several scenes of expulsion already familiar to Korean eyes. During the, things got messed up. Okay, during the 1997 Asian financial crisis, when the punitive measure of neoliberalism was systematically implemented on Korean soil, we witnessed a surge of suicide and homelessness in the adult male population, who had been the head of the household. Recently, Korean society has been struggling with a high suicide rate in the teens and young adult population. Korea has been marking the highest suicide rate in OECD countries for many years, with both unusually high rates in the teens and 20s and elderly population. The threat of expulsion seems to be ever present among us. In the context of neoliberal expulsion and self-destruction, the phenomenon of hikikomori is a curious one. Hikikomoris are individuals who, for various reasons, have cut off all social ties outside of and even with their family and have lived in seclusion in their room for extended periods. They have given up on being an economic contributor. The term hikikomori is a Japanese term coined by psychiatrist Satio Tamaki in 2003. It is translated into Korean as 은둔형 외톨이, which means loner in reclusion. 은둔형 외톨이 is a pain in the ass to transliterate into English. So I am going to use the Japanese term of hikikomori, which has been familiar to Koreans for the last 20-some years now. They're invisible, hiding in their rooms, but their traces are everywhere. Their hiding is painful to their family members, and their stories abound among psychotherapists. I have relatives who are semi-hikikomoris. Students bring their own stories of their family members and neighbors, angry at the world, their surroundings, their family, or their supporters that did not give them enough resources to compete in the market. They have given up on their possible financial contribution to the family. Whether they have experienced school bullies or domestic violence, I sense that they hover the unbearable clarity of their social location. They're about to be expunged. However, their family members are frustrated with their withdrawal from their productivity. A single woman who had to support a middle-aged brother in hiding reported the sense of grinding the endless mill for his sake, a Sisyphean task. One mother sighs, "My son feels like a vampire sucking on my blood." hikikomori turns into the undead. As the about to be expulged, they could have gone through self-destruction or erasure, maybe to the point of suicide or a substance overdose, but they are somehow alive, sucking on the blood of their family members. Thus, the suicides conducted on, I'm sorry, that's a very bad Freudian slip. The studies conducted on hikikomoris observed a high level of anxiety, gross lack of social skills, social withdrawal, hypersensitivity in interpersonal relationships, and aggression in this population. However, it is important to note that, as Rogers-Vaughan points out, looking for the cause of suffering within the victim of the third-order suffering can be a form of secondary victimization of the victim of the neoliberal trauma. Creative solutions were sought as social support system to address their psychosocial limitations and boost their economic productivity. To address their social awkwardness, for example, cafes from which the drinks are served through a tiny window in a teddy bear costume were implemented. By finding different ways to help the individual function in the market, the goal is to turn the surplus and the expunged into functioning human capital. The experts note that we need patient efforts devoted to these individuals to achieve such restoration. However, as the undead, the hikikomoris perhaps demand a more radically alternative perspective. Just as zombies do not recognize relationships and are only out to satisfy a single need, their outward appearance can be perceived as stubbornness and insensitivity to the concerns and pain of the people surrounding them. However, if the economic productivity they have abandoned is seen as the resistance to the paradigm of the neoliberal homo oeconomicus, who have lost their political subjectivity and became human capital, their seclusion may speak to a different form of political identity and subjectivity that needs further understanding. Then, understanding how economic and political subjectivities play out in their lives become a critical project. Maybe their undeadly spectral intentionality has a call that I need to answer. To answer this call, I look into the space the hikikomoris occupy. As people in hiding, they are difficult to approach. The rooms in which they have retreated to overlap with the cyberspace where their quiet yet active engagement of the world outside their room is happening. This space is a fractal space haunted by spectrality. They report that night and day are not distinguishable, as they fall asleep when they are sleepy and wake up when their eyes open. Their awakening times start by looking into the smartphones, the tablets, the computer, erasing the boundary of time and space. As early as 1997, cultural theorist Paul Virilio already has noted that in this space, architectural elements like a house or room begin to drift and float in an economic ether devoid of spatial dimensions, but inscribed in the singular temporality of an instantaneous diffusion. It is such a fluid and liminal space that these undead hikikomoris haunt or reside in. Such space distorts the gaze directed at it. Therefore, this research aims to articulate the dynamics formed in this liminal space when it meets the eyes of the researchers and others to reach an understanding of the political and economic subjectivity of the hikikomoris. Hikikomoris place themselves within their family. This is especially peculiar as the psychotherapists say in unison at the root of their psychological struggle, when they do talk to a therapist, lies family problems. Domestic violence, parental pressure, divorce, and alcoholism is often the issue they report. Hikikomoris are not always part of the most deprived families. Sometimes they belong to a middle-aged or even affluent family. Yet the outside of the room became unbearable, making them dig deeper into the innermost space within their family space. This is curious to me, having seen many former clients cast out of their family space, forcing them to roam on the street, not allowed back home, or not having a home to return to. Outside the locked door, the family members, are pained. That pain the hikikomoris are pacing around in frustration, concern, anger, and despair. What should one call this ironic turn of hiding space? Those who have run away are now running inward, inside, despite the pain they know to exist surrounding them. As the socially withdrawn ones, they are considered losers in the market, and the surplus humans who may, in other forms, have roamed around the outskirts or the human society. And Michel Foucault had traced them in the population of the lepers, the poor, the vagrants, who ironically turned into the mad, the insane, the criminals, who were ultimately hospitalized in asylums or incarcerated. In this strange turn of the hiding space, the vagrant or the marginalized had imprisoned themselves within the family structure, forcing the family members to be the correctional officers, only this time be of the enforcer. The authority to incarcerate is the incarcerated. What is accomplished in this reversal of the agency in social exclusion? Perhaps protection? What do they protect themselves from and how? Teaching spiritual care, counseling, and pastoral theology, I get visited by depressed students who seek help. One student who had gone through severe withdrawal into her own room, struggling with depression, anxiety, and eating disorder, had confided in me that multitudes of eyes always gazes at her. Their gaze follow her everywhere, and not only her. They show up in many other counseling sessions with young adults. Another student confessed that God is part of, or even the whole of such surveilling eyes, distant but always watching, and not in the loving parental gaze, but rather in the strict and distant austerity, waiting to see if she fails. These gazes of the eyes refract with ambiguous angles when they enter the room of a hikikomori. I say refraction, but the gazes may not even reach the spaces. In seeing like the state, political scientist James Scott explores how the state invented ways to make the land and population legible to the gaze of the state. Surveying and mapping the land to read the land as a taxable production area, translated into naming people with accuracy to count them as tax-paying servants of the state. That's why we have last names. However, in this room, hikikomoris evades the counting gaze of the state. The investigators of hikikomori repeatedly report the difficulty in creating accurate statistics of this population for various reasons. They are undistinguishable from the job-seeking population, hiding within the family who may have no intention to name their secluded children or siblings as hikikomoris to protect the smidge of family honor left, as they insist their young ones are trying to achieve the expected neoliberal goal of turning into valuable human capital. The hiding within the family is especially effective in Korean and Japanese society, where family liberalism functions. According to sociologist Jang Kyung-sup, in family liberalism, the nuclear family functions as one economic decision-making unit, unlike in Western liberalism, where each individual is an economic unit making economic decisions. Paradoxically, in the case of hikikomori, the formation of the economic unit of the family makes the individual member of the family invisible to the neoliberal state, as sequestered within the functioning economic unit of the family. Their room, located within the family liberalism's economic unit effectively evades the state's gaze. My effort to find them on the internet was ever unsuccessful, as they evaded the state's gaze and mine. However, it was obvious that they were gazing outward through the liminal and ethereal screen on their computers, tablets, and smartphones, secluded in their room. Their voices mixed with others, and it is almost impossible to distinguish them from the others. They resist distinction, categorization, and control. Nevertheless, I search hard to catch the gaze of hikikomoris looking out from the window of the internet. The gazes, as they travel through the liminal space of the internet, turn into fonts, icons, JPEG files, GIF files, then ultimately into the visual language and their visible voice, sometimes even audible. Thus, the search for the gaze turned into the search for the voices on various online platforms. As a non-gamer, I have asked gaming youth about the possibility of finding someone to talk to live in the internet games, but this effort simply taught me how unfit I am for such a task. My search for their potential political voices in the news medias, for example, where people can anonymously comment on each news articles, also became impossible as the voices of hikikomoris are indistinguishable from those functioning without hiding. On the internet, the distinction between the individuals crumbles down, and the unidentified subjectivity of the multitude safely sequestered the voices of the hikikomoris simply as one of them. Thus, the internet is a safe space where they are not seen but only see. However, their space also has a physical dimensions. In the various reports, did I miss several? Yeah. In the various reports on the lives of hikikomoris, the images of the physical space they occupied flow around. The image of the room with piled up trash formed out of instant food and delivered food packages looks inhabitable, but the life of the hikikomori continues there. The plastic items in the trash cannot rot or decompose, but something is decaying here. The undead seems to be lying in the plastic pile, like the also familiar scene of the undead lying in the coffin, ready to rise and roam around the human world. Looking into the images of their rooms, the resemblance to the tomb and burial vault seems uncanny. The undead occupies both. The grave is a place where the state no longer gazes inside. Grave, as Sheol, is where even God's grace and gaze do not reach. My constant frustration to find their gaze and voice finally reached this ironic conclusion. I am simply looking at the tombstone that tells where the tomb is lying, but I cannot look into it. The rare occasions in which one looks into the tomb after it has been interred is to investigate a crime or punish the dead posthumously. Until the corpse are defined as to be criminals, the gaze of the state has no business there. Thus, the space lay unreachable to my gaze until an accident that prompted the state investigation happened. So here's the explosion. Last April, a high school girl committed suicide, broadcasting herself live on Instagram as she jumped from a high-rise building on the busiest street in Gangnam. At the core of the accident was Depression Gallery, a live discussion board on an internet community platform called dcinsight.com. As an SNS platform created to share digital camera images a decade ago, this platform fossilized the term gallery to denote the discussion boards, which, to the surprise of many, has outlived all other online platforms and still functions as one of the most active interaction cyberspace. The Depression Gallery accident on April 16, 2023, prompted police and news media investigation, revealing that this discussion board has a user base of depressed teens and young adults in their 20s who express their emotional difficulties and feel empathized by others like them. However, it also attracted cyber predator who prey on vulnerable youth by luring them offline and sexually exploiting them. This girl had posted that she had been raped by someone she met on this board and had been forced to sell sex. In April, she began to urge people to join her in a suicidal effort, which was to be done after dining in the finest barbecue place and playing karaoke and games, and then by going up to the rooftop of the building from where the whole process will be broadcasted. As the broadcast began, someone had called the police, but the efforts to build an air mattress to catch her fell short of succeeding. The expert analysis and reaction to this accident focused on the sex trafficking crime, and the strongly recommended course of action was to close down the Depression Gallery. Initially, the police investigation prompted the company to strengthen its policing function. It consisted of erasing questionable posts without warning and adding suicide hotline information at the top and bottom of the board. As of May 15, the court has decided that there is not enough irregularity that warrants the closing down of the platform, which has enraged the concerned experts, including forensic psychiatrists and psychologists. As for me, this seemed like a research jackpot. After a long period of hitting around the bush, I had the most probable space frequented by hikikomoris, and I spent hours in the Depression Gallery to figure out the dynamics in this community. The galleries are laid out like any discussion board on online teaching platforms like Canvas or Blackboard. When I click on the newest post, it had a terse phrase with esoteric slang and a picture, and that I constantly needed to look up the Urban Dictionary type of lexicon here in Korea. These posts all had a picture file that users use almost as an identifier. I learned that later the rules of DCInsight.com requires the picture file as it originated as a digital camera picture gallery. Once I came out of the reading of the new post, the discussion board had 10 or 12 new posts that had pushed the post that I just saw down the list. You can see that's the one that I just came out. After spending many days on this platform, I looked into other popular galleries where 5 pages of discussion board posts were consumed each minute. Depression Gallery, as fast as its advancement looked in my perspective, was a slow, depressive gallery that moved slower than the non-depressive topic galleries. In this fast turnover, somehow several threads of conversations were happening through their likes, and which is read 개념, which means concept, and 비추, which means not recommended. If a post grabs the attention of many, it'll gain a thread of conversation within the post, which becomes visible by the number of the visits and recommendations. And that post will be put into a concept gallery. There are two boards on the left, you can see up there, and it's going to be moved there. So this board thus turns into the historical record of most popular posts that generated many responses. When a post gains legendary popularity, the fame travels through the internet and the people take pilgrimage, it's actually called pilgrimage, to this post, pay homage and read through the conversation. However, as the general process, the discussion on the Depression Gallery looked fragmented and meaningless. Even the approaches of the sexual predators to the vulnerable seemed fragmented and unintelligible. For a conversation to happen, you need to understand who is speaking to whom, but such basic elements were not very visible to me. Even here, hikikomoris are not distinguishable. On this board, it is difficult to spot anyone who spends the whole day in the space alone. Those visibly active seem to stay here chatting for about 2 hours. I counted them. Each time I came to the board, entirely new sets of nicknames were populated. The contents of their talk are depressive, but impressively, their activities are not limited to the depression gallery. After pouring out their fragmented thoughts and to the unknown others for a while, they find other galleries with more upbeat material and journeys through the cyberspace. The cyberspace and cyber actors mingle and become indistinguishable. In other words, the hikikomoris here do not need to identify themselves as such. They are equal contributor to the relational dynamics formed in this space. Nonetheless, their traces are there. Among the pilgrimage site that internet users visit to commemorate a significant internet moment is a ghostly place on Yahoo Korea server where DC Insight had its IP address once upon a time. There remains the suicidal note of a super hikikomori who terrorized the internet communities 24 hours a day. The time spent on the internet by this user marked him as a hikikomori. This user, named 대세는 전략, I think I have 대세는 전략. That name can be roughly translated as mainstream by strategy, had roamed around the internet, populating the boards with toxic comments and hate speeches, which made the managers block his post and other users resisting his engagement. These activities ended when he committed suicide by jumping from his parents' high-rise apartment building, which was reported to the community after a police investigation. The pure efforts and time invested in these activities became a legend in these communities, warranting commemorations in the next cohort of the internet users. This user proved that this space is where a hikikomori can gain visibility that was unattainable offline. Thus, the maintenance of such an online presence become immensely meaningful. Decompositions happen in this cyberspace. The site of decomposition is relationship and friendship. The first site is the relationship and friendship. The depression gallery operated with an ethical norm drastically different from the life outside the room of hikikomoris. Although vulnerability is constantly displayed here, relationships are not the aim of such expression. In many posts, the users repeatedly evoke the ethical code against 친목질, a derogatory term for friendship. NamuWiki, a Korean wiki site forcefully toned with sarcasm, contains well-researched articles on widely spread phenomena. It denotes 30-some pages to describing the phenomena of 친목질, and this ethical code deters friendship formation on the anonymous internet site as personal connections expressed on platforms like DC Insight galleries would prevent new users from joining the community. In other words, if one newly visits the gallery and notices the existing users know each other and form conversations based on that personal connection, the new user will assume that this board is operating to maintain their fellowship rather than to talk about the topic of the board, and so they're not going to join them. Preventing friendship permits all voices freedom of expression, guaranteeing absolute equality that forms radical democratization in this space. The depression gallery was operating very much under such principle. Each user expresses themselves without getting friendly empathy. Some of the most popular posts that got collected as the concept post express such process as follows. Coming to depression gallery, I get to see others who are going through similar experiences as mine. It was comforting to see so many of them here. Some had severe symptom histories, but they all said what was on their mind. I also expressed myself without holding myself back. This helped my healing process. Outsiders say bad things are happening here, but that is only a minor part of our gallery. Those who inhabit this space get comforted and even get better. I finally got a part-time job and will go out to do the work. Do you know how much my mom cried out of joy? Have you ever thought about how much this Dispression Gallery is contributing to lowering our suicide rate? Researchers pay attention to this ethical code of no friendship and note the devastating effect of 친목질 that destroys the online community's self-correcting resilience, ultimately destroying the community itself. Under the anti-friendship code, the collaborative process is not formed through respectful language, but rather through honoring the freedom of each individual, according to anthropologist Lee Gil-ho, who conducted a cyber ethnography of the dynamics of dcinside.com. Such freedom calls for rigorous maintenance of one's agency instead of succumbing to the need of others, which behavior is passionately disdained as the slave mentality. Creating an in-group is understood to be part of such a slave mentality, and the term that denotes people with such sense is interestingly zombie. My pastoral sense of community broke down in this ethical code of no friendship. A radical sense of equality forms with a new sense of relationality. A radical community requires radical language. Here, the linguistic hierarchy that distinguishes the formal and informal language breaks down as the informal language with heavy internet slang becomes the lingua franca. Furthermore, the vulgar speeches that would deem hate speech outside the space become the user turn of phrases. The first expression of the linguistic environment of the space seems disrespectful, politically incorrect, and antisocial, but once immersed in it, one gains the sense that it is primarily a way of communication that does not necessarily carry the emotional weight of the terms all the time. The roughness of the language has much to do with the no friendship ethical code, as the aggressive language prevents friendship formation, the necessity for the health of their anonymous online community. The language decomposes as the free agents and system control collides. First, vocabulary goes through a rapid transformation. Let me give you an example of a famous case of the birth of the term of 주작. Wow, the Korean fonts actually got destroyed here. The term 주작 means fabrication. So if you look at the Korean on the very top, you can see that the first letter and the letter right below it is very similar but has a different stroke in the middle, right? So one goes up and one goes down. One is O and the other one is U. So they just changed the pronunciation just a little bit. What happened is this: the user of a StarCraft gallery was there was a broadcast on us, live streaming online game, and the host fabricated the result of that online game, and the users of this gallery began to make fun of the host by using the term 조작, which means fabrication. The host responded by blocking the term 조작, which means but the users responded by substituting other terms for 조작. First, they changed the vowel and began to say 주작, and 주작 interestingly means this red bird, the red phoenix, in the old, very, very old Korean pantheon. So these are gods, and 주작 is one of them. Then that streamer blocked 주작, and they began to replace 주작 with all the other gods, 청룡, 벽호, 현무, and that words, all of those words began to mean fabrication. So when the process becomes so complicated, there are online communities who are recording all of this and putting the genealogy on the website like NamoWiki, and now people are going back to that site to pay the homage to these pilgrim sites. So language decomposition leads to a political decomposition. In each gallery of dcinsight.com, a gallery manager is only visible through the announcement post that always floats on the top of the board. There, the manager claims the right to erase or block users using inappropriate language or posting unrelated contents. Given that the lingua franca of this space is inappropriate in the offline world, this claim gives unchecked power to the manager in the eyes of the users. Two very critical events resulting from such censorship are well known in Korean society. When the collection of the most recommended posts in DC Insight turned more and more problematic in its aggression, the managers conducted proactive censorship, which prompted the gallery users to find another site to which they diligently moved the most recommended post before it got deleted. This was the case with 일간 Best 저장소, Daily Best Archive, and it's shortened into 일베, which is known to have a misogynistic undertone in their language and often harbors anti-feminist political rhetorics. Meghallion is another state that purports to mirror the misogynistic voices of ilbe through effective yet sometimes very threatening tactics. Both sides gained tremendous public attention as they generated many debates and even violence that need to be examined independently. Debates and criticism on the destructive influences of these websites abound. However, here I pay attention to how they resisted the manager's power, which they call the state, to maintain their freedom without turning into the slave of the state. The term state eventually confluences with the actual concept of the state as a sovereignty. Their resistance to such state generates images, videos, and text full of vulgar satires and slangs that disparage the state control. Sometimes their resistance is acted out in an offline space in norm-breaking activities that flabbergasted the general population. Whole different topic. Under such political understanding, the evaluation system of thumbs up or like and thumbs down and dislike turned into daily best, let's put it in the daily best board, or democratize. Okay? In other words, the term democracy deconstructs here to mean the negative system that they agree to dislike. As ilbe has been described in public media as problem space that harbors aggressive, misogynistic hatred, when one's anonymous participation in this particular online community is revealed, it is often deemed scandalous. Nonetheless, ilbe's decomposed terminologies of democracy proved to be impactful even among young women. One of the K-pop idol group members was scandalized when she used the term ilbe style in a public radio appearance. She stated that her group did not discriminate against people and added, "We don't do democracy," thus revealing that she frequents the ilbe sites. Returning to the neoliberal process that generate the third-order suffering and expungible population, I note that the hikikomoris are here, possibly being the most engaged and active members of the community, given their time at hand. And their public perception as loser or social evil are sometimes translated into the more, there's one more. Yes, here. Sorry about that. Their public perception as losers or social evil are sometimes translated into the more colorful language and social commentaries by upper generation as trash collection, extreme soap opera, fascist, and anti-history, anti-human rights, violent, and rebellious. However, several emerging researchers are calling for alternative perspectives. Jung Dae-hoon, a history doctoral student at Hanyang University, notes that the dynamics in this community are rather anti-authority and anti-majority, resulting from the exclusion they have experienced. Many younger generation scholars observe the ilbe population with curiosity and an empathic stance rather than as the object of hateful criticism. The combination of neoliberal exploitation and radical equality forming the radical community resulted in a derogatory yet revolutionary self-conceptualization. Yang Gi-min notes that underneath what is understood to be antisocial hate speech lies the 일베 members' self-understanding that they are themselves worms, parasites, and ghosts, calling themselves 일베충. Such language describes their lowly way of existence in the community, which allows the absolute freedom of expression that is less geared to despise the other. It is rather the language among the lowest of the lowest, interacting with one another in the muddy field of dirt, trash, and compost. Their political agency, which cannot function with legitimacy due to their age and social status, becomes that of a subhuman, not bound by political correctness, ethical norms, or state control. The economic activities performed in this internet space are no longer neoliberal. While the websites have advertisements on the sites, keeping the state going, the relationship among the users are not that of the neoliberal market competitors. However, they are active producers, endlessly generating new materials, and consumers eager to consume and transfer the goods to other internet spaces. Anthropologist Lee Gi-ho takes a detailed look into these economic activities, which he conceptualizes in conversation with gift economy paradigm of Marcel Mauss, Levi-Strauss, and Godelier. In this space, users gain fame for their nickname when their meme production gets traction. Such production needs a context that draws everyone's attention, from which they construct a humorous, satiric, sarcastic digital memes with memes that can circulate in the space. When a meme grabs the consumer's attention, it is received with gratitude and adoration, which translates into copying and distributing it around the internet and creating a mutation of the memes that moves around the internet. Through this generative process, the producers gain recognition of the origin of the meme within the community and an acknowledgement that it was so generated. This becomes a concentrated activity that no small amount of intellectual energy is devoted to. The entertainment value in this process is worthy of such devotion and time consumption that does not involve any monetary gain. The neoliberal market does not operate there, but only the narcissistic bestowing of one's production for the enjoyment of others. Such satisfaction may not be as much available outside the internet space. Such economic activities of the online community users have many other layers of dynamics that make them all the more engaging and enjoyable. In a podcast interview, Oxford economist Jang Jun-ha addresses the issue of growth in this time of environmental challenges, precisely the issue of the Anthropocene we are addressing in this conference. He notes that economic theories have functioned like theologies of the medieval time, representing the voices of the ruling class that controls the society and urges us to look beyond the paradigm of the current hegemony of the neoclassical economics that brought about the neoliberal paradigm that sees everything in terms of the market operation. Stepping out of the neoliberal framework, the original intent of the economic pondering becomes very apparent. Economics is a field that aims at better human life. Facing the current ecological challenges, Jang Jun-ha notes that economically advanced states need to focus on intellectual consumption, while developing countries with GDP less than 10,000 USD should be allowed to achieve material advancements. In other words, in countries where immediate physical security and hunger are not critical tasks to resolve, human satisfaction should be derived from non-material consumption so that natural resources are better directed to improve human well-being. The intellectual production and consumption happening in cyberspace achieve exactly such satisfaction. The hikikomoris that are spending hours after hours online engaging in such intellectual consumption is in fact engaging in an ecologically friendly economic activity. The marginalized on the internet are engaged not in self-destructive drug addiction or homelessness, but in eco-friendly alternative political and economic engagement that deters the expurged from material consumption-driven neoliberalism, actively defying the neoliberal rationality that governs everyone offline. Now, I want to move us to another space, equally liminal and transitional as the online space, into the world of mythology. In 1927, an anthropologist Adolf Jansen collected the myth of Hainuele from northern Indonesia, which centralized the composition and began to theorize the idea of the Dima, the deity myth. 9 families, it goes like this, 9 families of mankind came forth in the beginning from Mount Nanusaku, where people had emerged from clusters of bananas. An ancestor named Amita found a coconut speared in a boar's tusk and in a dream was instructed to plant it. In 6th day, a palm had sprung from the nut and flowered. Amita cut his finger and his blood dripped on the blossom. 9 days later, a girl grew from the blossom and in 3 more days, she became an adolescent. Amita cut her from the tree and named her Hainuele, coconut girl. But she was not like an ordinary person, for when she would answer the call of the nature, she excremented, her poop consisted of all sorts of valuable articles such as Chinese dishes and gongs, so Amita became very rich. During a major religious festival, Hainuele stood in the middle of the dance ground and excreted a series of valuable articles: Chinese porcelain dishes, metal knives, copper boxes, golden earrings, and great brass gongs. After 9 days of this activity, the people thought this thing mysterious. They were jealous that Hainuele could distribute with such wealth and decided to kill her. The ancestor dug a hole in the middle of the dance ground, threw Hainuele in it, and danced the ground firm on top of her. Amita dug up her corpse, dismembered it, and buried the cut pieces everywhere. These pieces gave rise to previously unknown plant species, especially tuberous plants, which have been ever since the principal food of Seram. For Jansen, this was the ideological myth that explains the origin of the principal crops of the region, in which the Dima deity, like Tiamat in Enuma Elish, whose dismembered body became the fertile ground from which other living beings were formed. However, Jonathan Z. Smith exegetes this story to reach a very different conclusion in Map Is Not territory. The central incongruity faced in this story is that the valuable objects usually used as money in Seram were excreted by Hainuele, thus curiously producing dirty money. This denotes how the native and European economic system crashed in what he calls the cargo situation. Mysteriously produced goods are endlessly generated from the cargo and exchanged without honoring the reciprocity principle of the gift economy, thus making the gifted items extremely problematic. Thus, the suspicious products excreting Hainuele is killed and buried alive, but as grotesque as it may seem, such killing is not an unfamiliar theme in many cultural mythologies. What draws my attention is that Hainuele's body, regardless of its suspicious origin, is decomposed and spawned previously unknown new crops. Whether her body was mythical, as signified by the prophecy in Amita's dream, or by her supernatural ability, or by colonizing manipulative deception, her dead body decomposed and produced life-giving crops. Decomposition equalized the previous political and economic agendas and turned them into life. In this process, the former entity, the personality, and the economic agendas, the former political and economic structure have all disintegrated and regenerated as a new living being, which were then consumed by the community. Thus, it is incorporated in other living beings. Here, I reach a new theology of resurrection that can contribute to a theological anthropology of the undead. Underneath the resurrection theology that inspired the cemetery inscription of the dead shall be raised, lies the assumption that the resurrected body will somehow have individual bodily integrity, which is precisely the assumption behind the individuality of each zombie that has not entirely decomposed. The cyberspace where the hikikomoris are mingling with others who feel the need to resist the neoliberal political and economic system turns into a site of this decomposition, which at first look seems unpretty and foul-smelling, as we see in the language and the breaking down of the political correctness. However, in the right condition, good life-generating compost can form, as decomposition has already started. Something radical is forming, and whether it fits our comfort level or not, it is gaining its own life, resurrecting. In this virtual world, the excluded, expurged hikikomoris and others gain a political and economic platform radically different from what has expelled them. However, this world has been hidden from the gaze of the outsiders. If so, can a Hainuelist type of resurrection happen in this space? Here, the vision of democracy, capitalism, patriarchy, feminism, empires, and colonies all seem to flow in and get decomposed, forming a murky mess. Then the next ecological process may turn them into a new life, totally unrelated to what has entered the cyberspace, just like Hainuelan crops. Could such new life constitute resurrection? In the time of the Anthropocene, when we are challenged to conceptualize a radically different, non-anthropocentric vision of the world, I wonder if the Christian concept of resurrection could be challenged and revised. When we resurrect, may we resurrect not in our own individual integral body, but as a nutrient to many plants, fungi, and microbes in the ecological world, forming many different lives. Maybe in our ecological pyramids, that's not it. Okay, our hope for resurrection and new life should be literally become part of radical others, dirt, stone, microlife, fungi, plants, animals, and more humbly returning what we received. To put this theological anthropology in a bigger frame, I turn to an atheist and astrophysicist, Neil deGrasse Tyson. And I want us to listen to this just a little bit. It's going, right?
What is the most astounding fact you can share with us about the universe?
The most astounding fact.
The most astounding fact
Is the knowledge that the atoms that comprise life on Earth, the atoms that make up the human body, are traceable to the crucibles that cooked the light elements into heavy elements in their core under extreme temperatures and pressures. These stars, the high mass ones among them, went unstable in their later years. They collapsed and then exploded, scattering their enriched guts across the galaxy. Guts made of carbon, nitrogen, oxygen. and all the fundamental ingredients of life itself. These ingredients become part of gas clouds that condense, collapse, form the next generation of solar systems, stars with orbiting planets. And those planets now have the ingredients for life itself. So when I look up at the night sky, and I know that yes, we are part of this universe, we are in this universe, but perhaps more importantly than both of those facts is that the universe is in us. When I reflect on that fact, I look up. Many people feel small because they're small and the universe is big, but I feel big because my atoms came from those stars. There's a level of connectivity. That's really what you want in life. You want to feel connected. You want to feel relevant. You want to feel like you're a participant in the goings-on of activities and events around you. That's precisely what we are, just by being alive.
Then the stars are resurrected in me as my atoms. If a decomposition, even in a cosmic way, can result in my life, I say this is resurrection grace more than enough. So here ends the roller coaster ride. Thank you.